Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the J&J Pod, featuring a conversation between Jon Laxmi and Jon Laxmi. The title of this week's episode: Take Your Job and Shove It.
Hey everyone, Jon Laxmi here with my father, Jon Laxmi as well. We're back on the J&J Pod, and it's a pod because it's a version of a podcast, but we're also a family pod. Now, this is episode 7, so we filmed a lot of episodes. You should check out our other content, right? You can find us in our handle, look at the description. Ranging from finance to mental health to personal improvement to economics, history, etc. And we're going to be doing a series on this, so we invite you to give us your thoughts and your feedback. A little background on me, right? I am the founder of Kismet. Now, Kismet means destiny, right? And I see Kismet as a solution and a mission, really a movement to address loneliness and the mental health issues that a lot of us have been facing, right? And I solve for that using what I call the science of connection and the lost art of love, right? How to interact interpersonally. My original beachhead right now is the romantic realm, but this is really applicable to every realm. Before this, I'd worked at the CIA's investment arm, focused on investments, a lot of them in this space. I've worked at the White House, NASA, JP Morgan, TED Talks, AI startups, you name it. And a lot of that has informed the content that we talk about here. So you should follow me. I'm one of the fastest growing influencers in the love and dating space focused on females. You can go to It's Kismet on TikTok or follow my personal Instagram, Jon Laxmi. But today we're going to be talking about take your job and shove it, right? A lot of us, I'm on my own entrepreneurial journey. My father's done several versions of it. So I will actually, I'll pass it off to him for all of you entrepreneurial aspirers, and we'll get this started. But Dad, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. So as Jonathan said, we are both trying to cover a range of topics in these conversations. And these are free-flowing conversations about a range of topics. And today we thought we'll talk about a topic that's on many people's minds these days. As Jonathan mentioned, I've done a number of things in my life. I'll come to that. I live in Atlanta, Georgia now, but I lived in the New York area for 30 plus years, was a banker and ran a private equity firm at one point. I worked in government for several years, originally came from India. And that itself was a big leap for me. And that's sort of something that we'll talk about, what it takes. And when you want to quit your job, I've done it 2 or 3 times in the hope that I'm doing something better. And so maybe start off, Jonathan, with your entrepreneurship. Now you started something, you quit your job and you're now doing something very different. And then I can talk about the things I've done.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's a good way to lay the framework, because I don't think I've met, there's a lot of people who love their jobs and they're able to express their passions and they've got a great team. But I think, of course, there is some freedom, and even the small version of a lemonade stand to expressing yourself artistically, etc. Those are all small forms of entrepreneurship, right? You just have to find a client on the other end. So I think for us, I've met a lot of people, especially in my generation, who don't like their job, right? They're jumping around jobs more. Millennials definitely do it. Gen Z, it's even happening more so. There's a new digital economy, and a lot of the entrepreneurial dream, I think, is being definitely spread through media, that whether it's the cliche get rich quick or it's the you don't have to work in a traditional institution. So for me, I think it's a similar itch that obviously growing up, seeing you on your journey of working entrepreneurially, and even when you were with firms, the intrapreneurship, right? Innovation within firms and ways that you can help these behemoths or more established institutions innovate. That is a large part of, I think, the younger culture for sure, which for me, what is entrepreneurship really, right? What is starting a business? We use all these big words, but it's solving a problem in your life, right? I think one of my original ideas a long time ago was I hated washing the dishes, right? I still do. And I wanted to create a paper plate cover made out of wax so that you don't have to wash the dishes. Probably not a bad idea, but the cost efficiency didn't make any sense. But that was a problem I faced in my own life. And for me, a deeper problem that I think is universal is loneliness, right? So for me, it was, they say some people have this entrepreneurial itch, etc., and you got to kind of get out, and some people are born for it. But it's really, you don't have to be Steve Jobs and have $1 billion business. Not every business needs to be a lemonade stand. Most people can fall somewhere in between about, living out their passion. some people may not be even doing their passion. It may just be solving a problem. So for me, it was a personal issue for myself. I knew there was a big market, and I had my share of successes in the more professional, traditional world. So I wanted to take my chance in this. And it's something I know I'm going to be in for the rest of my life. But for you, obviously at this point in your career, or at least, beyond career, you're doing a lot of things now. But I think, where was kind of this initial itch for you to almost be a pioneer or do something different than your peers, or, making it on your own?
Well, I grew up in a family where almost all my uncles, aunts, and my grandfather was a lawyer, and people worked regular jobs.
Yeah.
So there was not really much of the risk-taking mentality. But when I was going to college in a small town in India,
Sure.
I had a neighbor. His name was Raju, and he had not even finished high school. I don't think he dropped out of high school. He just wasn't really good enough for school, and he had a small store. But he would always tinker on something. He was a mechanical wizard.
Yeah.
He would take a bike and take it apart and assemble it back. He bought a very old car, took it apart and put it back, and he would let me drive the car, and he would experiment with one thing or the other, and that's really appealed to me. That's amazing to see this guy and he lived next door to us in a very good house. So he was making money from his shop, but he was trying to supplement it with other things.
Right.
And I got involved with him, and he tried different things. He became an agent for a fertilizer company.
Sure.
And he would sell the fertilizer to the farmers in the area. And then I wanted to drive his car. So he would say, go to this farmer and collect the money. And if you collect the money, I'll give you a small amount of money. So I could drive his car, and I could collect some money, make some money.
Yeah.
So this was really appealing. And then I had that in the back of my mind.
Sure.
But the big plunge, of course, was to leave India and come to the US. And that took risks. Not to organize a business, which entrepreneurs do, certainly. But once I left India and I went to the Middle East for a little bit, and then I tried to apply for a US visa. That took some risk and came here. And when I was in West Virginia, I worked for government. I was the budget director for the state of West Virginia at one point.
Yeah.
It was a good, challenging job, but it was also, the place was boring. Charleston, West Virginia, it's a small city. And I used to eat at a restaurant, and I talked to the restaurant owner, and he kept asking me for some loans. I would give him a small loan, $25, $50. And I studied his restaurant to see if it's a good business or not. It's a very, very bad business.
Sure.
If a restaurant business is very, very low margin, you need to cultivate a big following, customers who keep coming again and again and again. So I looked at businesses and said, this is not it, this is not it. And then when I went into banking, I think I got into a really good exposure to people who take risks.
Sure.
Because I got into a field called project financing. I was working at Morgan Stanley at this point.
Okay.
People with an idea would come to me, to my group, and say, I want to get financing for this idea. I want to build a power project. These were large projects, but it's just ideas. He would say, I've got a contract with a utility company, and I've got a contract with a construction company. That's all I've got, and I need to raise $100 million. And I would help them raise that money. Not all of them succeeded. I would work on 10 projects, 2 or 3 would succeed. But when they succeeded, we were able to charge a very good fee.
Okay.
I think this gave me a good sense of really what it takes to organize a new business, take risks.
Sure.
I wasn't taking those risks myself, but my clients were, and I looked at them and I could see the makings of really a good entrepreneur versus a not a good entrepreneur.
Sure.
And so we learn in our own ways. And then later on, I actually tried something on my own. But your generation, almost everyone now wants to be, they don't want to work in a big corporation, it seems to me, from what I read.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about really what your generation is looking for, because in my generation, most people went and looked for jobs in big government or corporations.
Yeah, no, I think, we've talked about this in other episodes, which this Maslow's hierarchy, right? The priorities of our generation and younger generations. A lot of us have grown up with more privilege and access to immediate dopamine release from technology, et cetera. So people are looking inwards, right? They want deeper relationships. They want to find meaning. They're sacrificing higher paying jobs to feel a sense of individuality. And when I think about how people can go about expressing that, right? People are adamant about choosing a therapist or a specific antidepressant brand that is individualized for themselves. And entrepreneurship, I think, is really no different in the sense that I ask people, right? I talk to women, hundreds of women a day to help them with their love and dating life, et cetera. And I ask, a lot of people, what are you passionate about? And a lot of people have kind of, things that are naturally exciting. I like to read, I like yoga, these types of things, right? But a lot of times you're not going to have, as a person, a deep thesis on life, right? You might not have the vocal cords that can change the world and become a singer, right? At some point, maybe you just don't want to work for someone else, right? You want to find some problem that you can solve, and it may not be a deep passion. Maybe you got to unearth your passion. So I would give the same type of advice, right? For me, I was preferential to something that I have experienced in my life myself. So the first thing you can do is looking into this individuality that my generation cares about. Think about first what's close to home. What are the problems in your life, right? If it's a problem in your life, as they say, it's probably a problem in other people's lives, right? That's the first thing. The next thing is it's the same thing as looking at a college degree, right? If you don't have an idiosyncratic passion that you think is going to be your life, you can Google, right, best college majors, right, that pay the most potentially or that reward you for the best quality of life, whatever it is. So you can look at the problems that people are focused on now, right, which is why a lot of people fall into the Bitcoin craze and things like that and get screwed without researching it. So I think the first thing for our generation, and then I want to pass this off to a question for you, but the first thing you got to do is identify a problem, right? What is entrepreneurship? It's solving a problem, and then other people pay you in some way for it, right? So I think identify a problem in your own life that expresses your individuality, or a problem that resonates with you that you think you can be good at, right? So that line between competency and, let's say, passion, right? Like people say, do what you love or do what you're good at. How did that factor into you processing either decisions in your entrepreneurial life or what you might advise for people in my generation?
Well, the competence in what I did, I was able to develop fairly quickly. Understanding the financial world, which is where I worked most of my career, especially from a macro point of view, because I worked in global finance at a very global investment bank.
Yeah,
that is something that I could develop. Of course, I had to do a lot of study and read up about it, attend conferences, meet people who knew a lot, and have good mentors. That's one of the important things. But then to find the passion to do it is something where you have to take risks and you have to really believe in yourself, and you have to convince other people to take a bet on you. When I went into this new field in banking, called project financing. There was no project financing before the 1980s in the banking world. And a small number of people on Wall Street, including I at Morgan Stanley, started this. Our bosses were very skeptical. They were saying, instead of pursuing standard corporate financings, they were saying, what is this? It takes a lot of time, a lot of work.
Sure.
Some of them succeed, some of them don't succeed. And you have to really have a mentor. That's, I think, quite important, a partner or a mentor. And I was both fortunate, and I think I went to people looking for mentorship. And when I found a senior person believing in me, then I used that mentorship to then gain the confidence and then project that confidence into the whole firm, up to a point where when deals failed, my mentor stood up for me. And at one point, there was a deal that was going to go bust, and the head of Morgan Stanley stood up for me and gave me the backing that I needed. And that, I think, came from my projecting my confidence that this is all a good business. And now this business has become pretty much commonplace. Lots and lots of banks do this. So you have to have conviction.
Yeah.
Passion comes from your own personal conviction. You have to be able to convey it to other people as well. And in your generation, if you're not working in a large organization, you have to really start in the proverbial garage. People don't have garages anymore. Maybe if you're working in an apartment or something like that. I guess you have the internet and all the technology now that you have
Sure.
available for it. And perhaps you can tell me in what ways are technology helpful for people who want to quit their jobs and do
Sure.
something. In what way is it not all that useful?
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this earlier, which is if you want to start a business today, right? If you want to quit your job, you want to move to a form of expressing your passion and your hobbies, right? First thing, so identify this problem. If you literally don't have something you're passionate about, what are you drawn to, right? What do you watch on YouTube, right? On Wikipedia, force yourself to spend 2 hours, see what you end up reading, right? Do some internal reflection, figure out what gets you going, or like we said, look at the external problem. The second thing is, and this ties to what you're saying about mentorship and feeling some support, and this ties to a lot of things we talk about in the mental health space as well. Run your ideas by people, right? Go to your close circle. If you want a literal manuscript of what to do today to start freeing yourself or to have a better life, right? It's way more fun to talk to women and get paid for it than working for some dude that I was doing prior, right? So identify a problem, just literally journal, write down a problem you want to solve. Call your friends or family, run it by them. Let's say it's even delusional idea, but they say it's good. You make it to the next step. Next step, who's going to pay for your product, right? Whether it's $1, $5, whatever it is, email someone, right? Google a company, find their email address, send it to 10 people. When I think about this journey for Kismet, right, I looked at the Forbes 400 list. I emailed all 400 of them, right? 90% of them didn't respond. They don't have time to. They don't care about this mission.
Doesn't matter.
They will eventually when I succeed. But some of them did. Some of them supported, and some, even if it was 2 or 3, like you said, were deep supporters and gave me that conviction that now I can charge $350 an hour to help women attract the man they want, right? So in a very clear, tangible way, if you were in your room, you can use the internet to do research on external problems or use it as a way to introspect on what makes you passionate.
Yeah.
Reach out to people that you're close to, run it by them. Then competitive research, see if someone's doing it. Reach out to someone you think you can sell it to, right? See if you have an audience, then do a low cost. But actually, before I get into this, let me ask your version of it, and then I want to give mine, right? We're talking about green flags and potentially what you can do. I want to know, what are the red flags that you've learned in your journey that people should not do? Mistakes. I'll give you an example. One is huge upfront startup costs, right? I want to start a pizza restaurant, so I'm going to buy that restaurant in the corner because I really love making pizza, versus I'm going to make 5 pizzas and see if someone's going to pay me $5 for it in my neighborhood, right? The right way to do it. So one red flag is if it's huge capital intensive, don't do it, right? So that's one red flag I'd say. But give me some of your takes on things you should avoid if you're in the process of, I want to start today. What are some things in mind?
Well, we don't really have to think about becoming the next Apple or anything like that.
Sure.
If you want to open a restaurant, quit your job and open a restaurant so you can be on your own, independent, autonomous. you can do those things, provided you focus specifically on your idea. Okay. Very often people get distracted with the macro environment around them.
Sure.
People say, well, the economy sucks, so this is not a good time to start a business. Oh, interest rates are going up. We can't get capital. This is not a good time to start a business. Those things really don't matter.
Okay.
Some of the best businesses were started in the worst times.
Sure.
In fact, Apple was started in the 1970s. Starbucks was started in the 1970s. In fact, during tough times, if you start a business, you are more likely to go through a tougher testing of your hypothesis, if your markets.
Sure.
And then once you graduate from that, you're likely to really succeed. But most important thing I would say is listen to the naysayers.
Okay.
Because so you can be sure that you can combat their objections and be stronger in your convictions,
or adapt from them, or learn from them,
learn from them. Right. But also, some of the things I mentioned is really have a partner.
Okay.
Who can also challenge you and complement you.
Sure.
If you're a lone ranger, it's most likely you'll be carried away with for too long. You need constant checks on the idea that you're working on.
Absolutely.
And when some people laugh at you, you listen to them. Why are they laughing at you? Are they laughing at the idea?
No, actually,
the idea, the thing that nobody has done it before, is not a good reason not to do it. If it doesn't make money, people say, well, it'll make money in the long run. That is one of the classic mistakes. You got to make money quickly, or else you're not in the business
Sure.
you're not going to be in the business long term. Now you mentioned, it's important to have scale your costs in
Yeah.
such a way that, right,
That's a red flag. I should speak. No, because that's a good point to lead off on, which is that even in developing Kismet, right? I mean, this is what they say the best way to entrepreneurship is just start doing it. It's like, okay, well, what do I do? I had the cliche of like, I'm going to need an LLC, right? I don't want to have copyright infringement. It's like, bro, you're a nobody. No one's trying to sue you right now, right? If I'm being sued, that's probably a good sign. It means my business is big enough. So don't focus on the formalities. If you want to do fashion, let's say you like designing shirts or something like that, don't make 50 shirts first and have to buy raw materials, etc. Make a few. Get a cheap website from Squarespace or Wix, right? Don't pay for Google Ads marketing. Start to organically send it to some people you know and see if there's a market, right? It's a very small thing you do. I think the average age of a successful entrepreneur is 43. And for some of the people who are on the higher end, right? Because I was working in venture capital. We could talk about, some of the people who are looking flush with dumb money, right? And capital. Venture investors on average, of course, they're trying to do good work, but by definition, the businesses, we hope we get a handful of winners from a ton of losers, right? Only 10% of companies actually end up succeeding and get funding. So when you're thinking about either you got to take on a loan, etc., and this is the same thing I'd say for college education, be financially austere. Imagine what you can do in today, literally today, to make $5. If it's got to start with that, if you can start with that mindset, that principle will allow you to then scale to whatever amount of money. Like we said, we don't have to be billionaires here. A lot of this is about freedom and individual expression. And I learned that the hard way also with Kismet, for example. Right, I'm single. Part of the reason I started this is to find the love of my life because I want more exposure. And I'm literally talking about the very things I'm looking for while helping women. And when I started this, I started with some filters. I tried to do a hyper masculine personality, and my followers were all angry men, right? Which you'll see a lot of these, despots, they get angry men. Understandable, they're lonely too. And I was like, this is not enjoyable for me, right? The process should be enjoyable. If you love making shirts, you want to start a business to help someone you care about feel better, etc., you have to enjoy it to some extent, right? That's what makes the difference of being disciplined. So I switched my strategy. I started talking as if I'm talking to the love of my life. Now, out of my 73,000 followers, 99.9% are women, which is great fuel. So I think, yes, you need to be resilient. Yes, there's going to be an unknown. Having that partner, like you said, can help. Having some passion also helps for the hard days, right?
Yep.
And having a problem sometimes that can philosophically activate you on a moral basis can also help. But when you think about what is important, if you had to give kind of a playbook, the same thing I'm kind of hinting at, someone comes to you and says, hey, I don't like my job, right? I want to quit it eventually. I want to do something of my own. I think I like this, but we're in a digital first age, right? I don't want to go brick and mortar, but I'm passionate about knitting or something, right? Or I want to help my favorite celebrities. I want to help them get more business because they inspired me when I was sad, and I want to help them. What can they do today to start that process?
The first thing is to really, once you have that idea, crystallize it, make it a very concrete idea. You mentioned, if you want to knit something, using some new patterns and so on, do it. Start doing it.
Okay.
And call people that can react to it. Call your friends. Call your people that you trust, and tell them, this is what I want to do. You're not quitting your job yet, but you're actually testing your idea, hypothesis.
Sure.
You actually start calling people around and say, this is what I plan to do, and actually start doing it, and go and try to see if somebody looks at it and values it, and they pay you for it, right? And in almost everything, it's not something like drawing up a business plan and putting it on a website. You actually have to deal with real people to test the idea, and then real people to actually see if somebody would buy that product or not, buy your service or not. And you mentioned the idea of the importance of austerity and testing it.
Yeah.
Later in life, I started a company of my own with some partners, and it was a big a new idea of starting an investment fund to invest in a new approach.
Yeah.
And 5 of us got together, very good friends of our friend. We were friends, and so we were complementary in nature. There was good chemistry among us. What we did for several months, we used to meet in a food court in New York City. We didn't immediately, do these days. The thing to do is they immediately get an office, secretaries, and burn up a lot of money. For months, we would meet in this food court early in the morning, discuss the ideas, jot down some notes, make some calls, grab lunch at one of the fast food restaurants in the food court, come back in the afternoon, come with additional things to do.
Yeah.
Each one of us had friends to call. Now, this is what we plan to do.
Sure.
This was to really test the hypothesis. And then we started actually going out and saying we need money to start this investment fund. So the important thing is to really get down to it and not really keep talking about it and totally if you believe in it, you will fail several times. It's many people who we showed our business plan to, our ideas to, they laughed at us. And this was not necessarily a good time to start a business. It was just before the financial crisis started in 2007.
Sure.
But it didn't matter. It was a good idea, and we got down to brass tacks.
Sure.
And I think this is something that everybody can do. It doesn't take some whiz kid with some brand new idea.
And you don't even need to. I think you don't need to quit your job. I think you let it. I said this in one of the dating episodes, which is that, shed, don't shun. Don't quit everything, buy a massive office, right? Let the business compel you. But I think one of the things we're talking about, there's this line between, like, not all entrepreneurs are cut the same in this sense, that there's a line between test yourself in the market and create the market, right? Because for me, for example, if I found the first 100 people were like, I don't really care about loneliness, might have tweaked it a bit, but I have deep conviction. I'm like, if I'm experiencing this, I would brute force until I found the market. Or I'd tell people, you guys are experiencing this and you're not even aware of it, right? So I think it's important to also take into account how you function as a person. Let's say you're hypersensitive to rejection. Okay, then you compensate by then trying 100 ideas. Be very receptive to change. Let's say you have deep thesis like me. Then get 100 rejections and deepen your conviction, right? Figure out what breed of entrepreneur you are as well, right? So I think there's different ways to figure out how you want to go about going through your business versus just, we have to be hyper resilient. Some people might be less resilient, but when I think about a thought experiment of how to figure out what you're passionate about, because there's that line that a lot of success in life comes through consistency and discipline, right? There's going to be a guy who hates going to the gym or eating healthy. You might care about a skincare routine or your job currently, right? You have to stick at. If you just stick with it every day on the days you don't feel like it, you will get results. But what is the best ingredient to be consistent? Liking something, right? So introspect, figure out, maybe go crazy, hyperbolic style. Is there something you die for? If you had to cry about something today, what would you get upset about if your friend couldn't have access to it? Do different thought experiments to figure out what gets you going. Yeah. And that will result in consistency and discipline. But it seems like you have a thought on that.
No, I was saying that the happiness in starting one's own business and running one's own business really comes from the fact that it's your creation. Okay. It's not about being totally independent. It's not being totally autonomous, because every business has got customers that you have to please. Otherwise, you won't have a business. It's about the fact that it's yours. It's something that you can call your own, and satisfaction that comes from it. If you have a job, it's you are subject to a number of other forces, and you may still be able to get, if you're happy with your job, that's fine. But a lot of people are now finding that in the job there are many constraints. And the jobs also have now more risks anyway. And so why wouldn't you try something that you like and try to do it yourself? 100%. Organizing it is becoming easier and easier. Organizing a business is becoming easier these days with all the technology and the templates that are available. So the takeaway, I think, is really to encourage people to take a chance. Get into it.
The biggest risk you're taking, I'd say the biggest risk you're taking is by not trying. Like the quote, 80% of the shots you don't take are the ones you fail, whatever. 80% of success is showing up, right? So I think that if you want to, this is a calculated, low risk bet on yourself, right? It's a matter of almost self-esteem to express yourself and see if the world wants to recognize you for that. So I think, I mean, the message is, yeah, this is a good way to understand yourself, to get some version of freedom, and to make money potentially in the best outcome.
Yeah. So let's encourage and we will invite the listeners to send in ideas, questions. Have you tried this? What kind of roadblocks have you faced? And let's solve these problems together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dad.